You can't grow food here. This isn't some country bumpkin neighborhood. I looked up from my tomato plants to see a woman in designer sunglasses standing at the edge of my property. Her arms crossed and face pinched with anger. This was my first meeting with Eleanor Whitfield, and it wouldn't be the last. Actually, I can, I replied calmly, wiping dirt from my hands. This land has been a farm for over 50 years. I bought this place 6 months ago after saving every penny from 30 years of teaching. 5 beautiful acres on the edge of Maple Creek Estates with rich soil perfect for growing. My retirement dream was simple. Grow organic vegetables, sell at the farmer's market, and live peacefully. Eleanor's face turned red. I'm the president of the Maple Creek Homeowners Association, and your farm violates at least 6 community guidelines. She spat out the word farm like it tasted bad. My property isn't part of your HOA, I explained. Check your maps. This land is zoned agricultural and was here long before your development. Nonsense. She pulled out her phone and snapped photos of my garden beds. These weeds are an eyesore. The neighbors are complaining about bugs and smells. This affects our property values. I stood up straight. These aren't weeds. They're organic vegetables worth thousands of dollars. And there are no bad smells. I don't even have livestock. Eleanor's eyes narrowed. We'll see about that. Expect official notice soon. She stomped away in her spotless white shoes. I shook my head and returned to my plants, but a knot formed in my stomach. I'd heard horror stories about power-hungry HOAs, but never expected to face one myself. That night, I dug out my property papers and spread them across the kitchen table. The deed clearly showed my 5 acres were outside HOA boundaries and zoned for agricultural use. I took photos of every page, just in case. 3 days later, I found an official-looking envelope stuck to my door. Inside was a notice claiming I had 14 days to remove all agricultural activities, or face fines of $100 per day. It cited rules about approved landscaping and neighborhood aesthetic standards. I called the county records office immediately. Yes, Mr. Davis, your property is definitely zoned agricultural, the clerk confirmed. The HOA has no jurisdiction over your land. Would you like me to send you official documentation? Yes, please, I replied, relief washing over me. Email and certified mail, if possible. Armed with official paperwork, I wrote a polite but firm response to the HOA, explaining their mistake and attaching copies of my zoning documents and property maps. I hand-delivered it to the HOA office and kept a copy for myself. A week passed without response. I was harvesting bell peppers when my neighbor Jeff from down the road stopped by. Thought you should know, he said, leaning on my fence. They were talking about you at the HOA meeting last night. That Eleanor woman has it out for you. What did she say? I asked, offering him a fresh pepper. Jeff took it with thanks. She kept calling your place the eyesore farm and said they need to take action before others get the same idea. Some folks agreed with her, but others pointed out you're not even in the HOA territory. Did they mention my letter with the zoning documents? Nope. Jeff bit into the pepper. Man, these are good. Eleanor acted like she never got anything from you. My comm began to crack. That's ridiculous. I delivered it myself. Watch your back, Jeff warned. She's got some board members wrapped around her finger. They're planning something. That evening, I installed 4 security cameras around my property. Cost more than I wanted to spend, but Jeff's warning left me uneasy. It was a good decision. 2 days later, the cameras caught 3 people in matching polo shirts marked HOA Landscaping Committee, walking around my property, taking photos and notes while I was at the farmer's market. They even pulled up some of my carrot tops to examine them, leaving the vegetables exposed to the hot sun. When I returned and discovered what happened, I immediately checked the footage. There was Eleanor leading the group, pointing at my rows of vegetables and speaking animatedly. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but her angry gestures made it clear. I printed still images from the video and added them to my growing file of documentation. The next morning, another notice appeared, this one declaring my property a public nuisance, with increased fines of $250 per day, retroactive to their first notice. At the bottom, Eleanor had handwritten, "Perhaps now you'll take us seriously." I took a deep breath and called a lawyer friend for advice. "Don't pay a cent," she said after hearing my story. "They're hoping you'll crack under pressure. Their notices mean nothing since you're not under their jurisdiction." "So what should I do?" I asked. "Document everything. Send another letter by certified mail so they can't claim they didn't receive it. And post no trespassing signs immediately. They've already committed trespass by entering your property without permission." I followed her advice, posting signs that afternoon and sending a firmly worded letter by certified mail, requesting they cease harassment and respect property boundaries. 3 quiet days passed. I began to hope Eleanor had finally checked the property maps and realized her mistake. Then I woke to the sound of machinery. Rushing outside in my pajamas, I found a landscaping truck parked on the road and 2 men in uniforms approaching my tomato beds with weed trimmers. "Stop right there," I shouted, running toward them. "This is private property." The men looked confused. "We have orders from the Maple Creek HOA to clean up this area," one said, showing me a work order with Eleanor's signature. "This property is not part of Maple Creek," I explained, pointing to my newly installed "No Trespassing" signs. "Please leave immediately." They glanced at each other uncertainly. "Look," I said, "I don't blame you guys for doing your job, but there's a boundary dispute here, and if you cut down my crops, you could be liable for damages." That was enough to convince them. They apologized and left, but not before I took photos of their truck and the work order. I was shaking with anger as I called my lawyer again. This had gone beyond harassment to attempted destruction of property. "I think it's time to go on the offensive," she said. "Let me draft a cease and desist letter. In the meantime, make your boundaries crystal clear." That afternoon, I installed bright orange survey markers along my property line and added more no trespassing signs. I also set up a trail camera hidden in a tree that covered the area the landscapers had targeted. As the sun set, I stood surveying my farm, the neat rows of vegetables I'd worked so hard to grow, the fruit trees just beginning to establish themselves. Why couldn't Eleanor just leave me in peace? Little did I know, her next move would force me to fight not just for my property rights, but for my entire livelihood. "They're stealing my tomatoes," I yelled into my phone, watching in disbelief as my security camera livestream showed Eleanor and 5 other people in HOA polo shirts filling baskets with my vegetables. "I'm 15 minutes away," my lawyer Sarah responded. "Don't confront them alone. Call the police right now." My hands shook as I dialed 911 and reported the theft in progress. I'd gone to town for supplies, never expecting the HOA would be bold enough to actually steal from me in broad daylight. I raced home, arriving just as Eleanor was directing her crew to move toward my prized heirloom tomato plants, the special ones worth $6 each at the farmer's market. "Stop right there," I shouted, jumping out of my truck. "What do you think you're doing?" Eleanor turned to me, completely unashamed. 6 baskets already overflowed with my vegetables, peppers, cucumbers, zucchini, and early potatoes. Hundreds of dollars worth of produce I'd spent months growing. "Oh, we assumed since you refused to maintain your yard properly, this food was going to waste," she said with a smug smile. "We're just helping ourselves to what you clearly don't value." Thomas Jenkins, the HOA treasurer, stood nearby, actually biting into one of my purple Cherokee tomatoes. Juice dripped down his chin as he chewed my hard work. "This is private property," I pointed to my signs. "You're trespassing and stealing. I've called the police." "Don't be ridiculous," Eleanor laughed. "We're the HOA. We have every right to enforce community standards. And frankly, this eyesore needs to go. My property isn't part of your HOA. I've shown you the documents." My voice grew louder as anger and disbelief washed over me. "Documents can be changed," Thomas said between bites of my tomato. "We've already spoken to the county about rezoning this area." My stomach dropped. Could they actually do that? "You need to leave immediately," I insisted, pulling out my phone and filming them. "This is criminal trespassing and theft." "Oh, please," Eleanor rolled her eyes. "It's just some vegetables. Not like they're worth anything." They're worth thousands to me. This is my livelihood. Should have thought about that before refusing to comply with our notices, she snapped. Maybe next time you'll take us seriously. They started walking toward the road, still carrying my produce. Eleanor turned and added, "You'll be receiving another citation and fine for multiple violations. I suggest you comply quickly before things get worse." The threat in her voice was unmistakable. A police car pulled up just as the HOA group reached the road. Officer Martinez stepped out, looking confused at the scene. "What's going on here?" he asked. "These people trespassed on my property and stole my crops," I explained, showing him my no trespassing signs. "We did no such thing," Eleanor interrupted. "We were conducting a routine inspection of community grounds and removing unhealthy plants that were attracting pests. My property is not part of their community," I insisted. "I have documentation proving it's agriculturally zoned land outside HOA jurisdiction." Officer Martinez looked uncomfortable. "Do you have that documentation available?" "Yes, in my house," I said, "and I have security camera footage of them picking my vegetables without permission." "We had every reason to believe we were acting within our authority," Thomas added smoothly. "This is a simple misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding doesn't fill 6 baskets with someone else's vegetables," I countered. Just then, Sarah pulled up in her car. "I'm Mr. Davis's attorney," she announced, joining our group. "And I strongly suggest the HOA members return all stolen property immediately and leave the premises." Eleanor's face hardened. "We've done nothing wrong." "Then you won't mind explaining that to a judge," Sarah replied coolly. "Officer, my client wishes to press charges for trespassing and theft." "Now wait a minute," Thomas began, suddenly looking nervous. Officer Martinez sighed. "Let's all calm down. First, I need to see the property documentation to determine jurisdiction." While I retrieved my papers, Sarah quietly filmed the baskets of vegetables and the HOA members. When I returned, Officer Martinez reviewed the documents. "Based on these papers, this property does appear to be outside HOA boundaries," he concluded. "Ms. Whitfield, your group needs to return any items taken from this property and leave immediately." Eleanor's face turned bright red. "This is outrageous. We're trying to protect our community's values. By stealing my crops?" I asked. "They're not crops, they're weeds," she shouted. Officer Martinez raised his hand. "Ma'am, please return the vegetables and leave the property now." Glaring at me, Eleanor instructed her people to put down the baskets. "This isn't over," she hissed. After they left, Officer Martinez took my statement and collected copies of my security footage. "I've dealt with this HOA before," he said quietly. "They're known for pushing boundaries, but this goes beyond their usual tactics." "Will you arrest them?" I asked. "I'll file the report, but the district attorney will decide whether to pursue charges. In the meantime, I suggest strengthening your security." After he left, Sarah and I surveyed the damage. Beyond what they'd harvested, many plants were trampled or broken. "This is at least $2,000 in losses," I estimated, not counting future harvests from damaged plants. "We need to respond forcefully," Sarah advised. "I'll file for a temporary restraining order today, but they're escalating, and you need to be prepared." "For what?" "If they're talking about rezoning, they're playing a long game. We need to get ahead of it." That evening, I emailed the county zoning board requesting information about any pending rezoning requests for my area. I also called the local newspaper and invited a reporter to visit my farm. "Why is this newsworthy?" the editor asked skeptically. "Because the Maple Creek HOA is trying to force out a legally operating small farm by harassment, trespassing, and theft," I explained. "And I have it all on video." That got his attention. "We'll send someone tomorrow." I spent that night reinforcing my fencing and installing better lighting around the property. Sleep came in short bursts as every noise had me checking the security cameras. The next morning, I found another notice taped to my mailbox. This one declared my property a biological hazard due to uncontrolled plant growth and insect breeding, and threatened daily fines of $500. As I stared at this ridiculous escalation, my phone pinged with an email from the county zoning office. My stomach twisted as I opened it. Dear Mr. Davis, this email confirms receipt of application #ZR 2022-47 requesting rezoning of parcels including your property from agricultural to residential HOA. Public comment period begins in 30 days. They were actually trying to change the zoning from under me. How could they possibly succeed? The reporter from the local paper arrived as I was still processing this news. Jenny Kim was younger than I expected but asked sharp questions and took plenty of photos, especially of the damaged crops. Mind if I see the security footage? She asked. I played the video of Eleanor and her crew helping themselves to my vegetables. Jenny's eyes widened. And they just took whatever they wanted? That's brazen. They seem to think they're above the law, I said. She took notes rapidly. I'd like to interview some neighbors too. Get both sides. Please do, I encouraged. The truth is all I want. After she left, Sarah called with news about the restraining order. We have a hearing scheduled for next week, she said. But there's something else. I looked into that rezoning application. Guess who submitted it 3 weeks ago? Eleanor. I guessed. Close. Thomas Jenkins. And you won't believe who he's related to. His brother-in-law is County Commissioner Williams. The pieces clicked into place. So that's why they're so confident. Exactly. This isn't just an HOA overstepping boundaries. This is a coordinated attempt to force you out. I sat down heavily, suddenly understanding the full scale of what I was facing. So what do we do? Fight on multiple fronts, Sarah advised. The restraining order, the police report, the media coverage. And we challenge the rezoning application directly. Can we win? Agricultural land is protected in this county. They'd need to prove your farm causes actual harm to surrounding properties, not just aesthetic complaints. But it won't be easy, especially with connections to the commissioner. As we finished our call, I noticed a car driving slowly past my property. Thomas Jenkins was behind the wheel, watching my house intently. I realized then that this wasn't just about protecting my farm anymore. This was about standing up to bullies who thought their power gave them the right to take whatever they wanted. And if they wanted a fight, I would give them one they'd never forget. I stared at the yellow paper in my hands, my stomach twisting into knots. $2,500 in fines. The HOA citation listed crazy violations like unapproved agricultural use and excessive vegetation on my own farm that had existed long before their fancy neighborhood. Eleanor had wasted no time after stealing my vegetables. The paper demanded I rip out my crops and install approved residential landscaping within 30 days or face more fines. My hands shook with anger as I called Sarah Johnson, a lawyer friend who specialized in property rights. She arrived that afternoon, her face growing increasingly concerned as she reviewed the citation. This is complete nonsense, she said, spreading out county maps on my kitchen table. Your property is clearly marked as agricultural land. It's been zoned that way for over 50 years. We spent hours digging through my property documents, finding the exact paragraph that stated my farm was grandfathered in and exempt from any future development restrictions. Sarah's eyes lit up when she found it. This is gold, she said, pointing to the legal language. They have absolutely no authority over your land. None. The next morning, we sent a detailed cease and desist letter, including copies of my deed, zoning documents, and property boundary maps that clearly showed my farm outside HOA jurisdiction. I felt a weight lift from my shoulders as Sarah assured me this would end the matter. They're just bullies, she said. Most bullies back down when someone stands up to them. 3 days later, I found another notice stuck to my door. Not only had they ignored our letter, but they'd increased the daily fines to $250 per day for continued non-compliance. My total now stood at $5,000 and climbing. They can't do this, I muttered, calling Sarah immediately. While waiting for her to arrive, I spotted 2 men in Maple Creek HOA polo shirts walking through my tomato fields with clipboards. When I approached, they claimed to be landscaping evaluators, assessing the violations. Before leaving, one of them picked a handful of my best strawberries, popping them into his mouth as he walked away, just documenting the nuisance. He called over his shoulder with a smirk. That night, I installed 8 security cameras around my property, positioning them carefully to cover every entrance point and most of my crops. I slept better knowing I had electronic eyes watching. My peace lasted exactly 1 day. A loud knocking woke me at 7 a.m. Officer Martinez from the local police department stood on my porch, looking uncomfortable. "Someone filed a complaint about your security cameras," he explained. "They're claiming invasion of privacy concerns." I showed him each camera angle on my laptop. "See? They only cover my property. I'm not filming anyone else's yard or house." Officer Martinez nodded, making notes. "Everything looks legal to me, but watch yourself with the Maple Creek HOA. I've responded to several calls involving them. They're known for pushing boundaries." He lowered his voice before leaving. "Between us, document everything. Every interaction, every piece of mail, every trespasser. You might need it." His warning proved prophetic the very next day. I woke to find my tomato plants drooping in the early light. Following the wilted plants led me to a horrifying discovery. Someone had cut through my main irrigation pipes in 3 different places. Without water in the summer heat, nearly a quarter of my crops were already dying. Checking my security footage revealed Thomas Jenkins, the HOA treasurer, sneaking onto my property at 2 a.m. with wire cutters. The video clearly showed him methodically cutting through my water lines before disappearing back into the darkness. I called Eleanor immediately, my voice shaking with rage. "Your treasurer destroyed my irrigation system last night. I have him on video committing vandalism. I'm calling the police." "Don't be dramatic," Eleanor replied calmly. "Thomas was investigating reports of a water leak that's affecting properties in our community. If anything, you should thank him for identifying the problem." By cutting my pipes with wire cutters at 2 a.m., I nearly shouted. "I'm sure you're misinterpreting what you saw," she said dismissively. "Besides, if you'd comply with our reasonable requests to remove that eyesore you call a farm, none of this would be happening." I spent the entire day repairing pipes and hand-watering plants that could still be saved. The damage would cost me thousands in lost crops. This wasn't about neighborhood appearance anymore. They were deliberately trying to ruin me. As darkness fell, I sat exhausted on my porch, dirt still under my fingernails. A delivery truck pulled up, and the driver handed me a thick certified letter. Inside was a formal notice from the HOA's attorney threatening to place a lien on my property if I didn't pay the now $7,800 in accumulated fines. The letter ended with an ominous paragraph. "Failure to comply will result in the HOA board pursuing all available legal remedies, including forced compliance through court order." I called Sarah, who answered despite the late hour. "They're trying to scare you," she said after I read her the letter. "But they've made a critical mistake. By threatening legal action, they've opened a door for us." "What do you mean?" I asked, watching the stars appear above my damaged fields. "They think they have the power here, but they've actually given us exactly what we need," Sarah explained, her voice gaining excitement. "Tomorrow, we're going to county records to pull something they don't want anyone to see. The official HOA boundaries filed with the county. And then we're going to give them a surprise they'll never forget." As I hung up the phone, a plan began forming in my mind. If Eleanor and her HOA cronies thought my farm was their personal grocery store, perhaps it was time they learned what things really cost. The war had escalated beyond paper threats. Now it was time to hit them where it would hurt most. I hammered the last stake into the ground and stepped back to admire my handiwork. The huge wooden sign stood proudly at the edge of my property where every car entering Maple Creek Estates would see it. In bright red letters, it proclaimed, "Maple Creek HOA members. All produce $50 per item. Trespassing fee, $500. Cameras monitoring 24/7. Sarah and I had spent the morning at the county clerk's office, where she'd requested the official HOA boundary maps. Just as we suspected, my property wasn't just exempt from HOA rules. It wasn't even inside their jurisdiction at all. They had been lying from the start. If they want to treat my farm like their personal grocery store, I told Sarah, then it's time they pay store prices. For everyone else, my roadside stand kept the usual fair prices: $3 for a pound of tomatoes, $4 for fresh peppers, and $5 for a basket of berries. I added a small note explaining why HOA members face different pricing, due to ongoing harassment, trespassing, and crop theft by Maple Creek HOA leadership. Word spread like wildfire. By noon, my stand was busier than ever with curious customers from neighboring towns. Several Maple Creek residents who weren't on the HOA board stopped by, expressing sympathy. "Eleanor's gone too far this time," whispered Mrs. Rodriguez, who lived on the corner lot. "Half the neighborhood is afraid to speak up against her. But many of us think what she's doing to you is terrible." "Has she done this before?" I asked, bagging fresh zucchini. Mrs. Rodriguez nodded. "Last year, she forced the Jacksons to remove their children's treehouse, even though it was completely safe and beautiful. When they refused, someone cut down the tree by accident during their vacation. Around 2 p.m., a black SUV screeched to a halt in front of my stand. Eleanor stepped out, followed by Thomas and 2 other board members I recognized from their previous vegetable raid. Her face turned almost purple when she read my sign. "Remove that discriminatory sign immediately," she demanded, marching over to where I sat helping customers. "It's harassment and violates our community bylaws about signage." I noticed several customers pulling out their phones, discreetly recording the confrontation. "Perfect. My property, my rules," I replied in the calmest voice I could manage. "Unless you'd like to admit in front of all these witnesses that you have no jurisdiction over my farm?" Eleanor's eyes darted to the watching crowd. For the first time, I saw uncertainty flicker across her face. "You can't charge different prices to different people," Thomas interjected. "It's discrimination. Actually, I can refuse service to anyone who has trespassed on my property and stolen my produce," I replied, pulling out a folder. "Would you like to see the security footage of your midnight shopping sprees? I'm sure these nice people would find it interesting." A young woman in line spoke up. "Are you saying they've been stealing from you?" Before I could answer, Eleanor cut in. "This is a private matter between the homeowners association and a property in violation of our standards." "Except I'm not in your association," I countered, spreading the county maps on my table. "These official boundaries filed with the county show my farm is completely outside Maple Creek Estates. You have zero authority here." Several customers gathered around to look at the maps. Mrs. Rodriguez gasped when she saw them. "They've been lying to all of us," she said. "The HOA newsletter claimed your farm was breaking association rules, but you're not even in our boundaries." Eleanor's face twisted with rage. "This isn't over," she hissed, grabbing Thomas by the arm and dragging him back to the SUV. "You'll regret making an enemy of me." As they drove away, a small cheer went up from the watching crowd. Sales that day broke all my previous records as people came specifically to support the farmer standing up to the HOA tyrant. As one customer put it, "For the first time in weeks, I felt hope. The truth was coming out and people were on my side." Even some Maple Creek residents bought produce, slipping me notes with information about other HOA overreaches that might help my case. That night, I slept soundly for the first time since the conflict began. My security system was upgraded, my legal position was solid, and public opinion was turning against Eleanor. I should have known it wouldn't be that easy. Dawn revealed my beautiful sign smashed to pieces, the wood splintered and the paint scratched off. 6 new violation notices were stuck to my front door, now including illegal commercial activity and discriminatory business practices. The fines had doubled to $15,600 overnight. But unlike previous times, I didn't feel despair. I calmly walked to my security system and downloaded the night's footage. There, in crystal clear 4K video, were Eleanor and Thomas. At 3:17 a.m., they had attacked my sign with hammers and a crowbar, their faces clearly visible under the security lights. I called Sarah immediately. "You won't believe the gift they just gave us," I said, sending her the video. Criminal destruction of property, she responded after watching. Plus trespassing again. We've got them. But Sarah wasn't the only one I called. Over the last week, I'd been keeping detailed records of every interaction. I'd spoken with neighbors who'd suffered under Eleanor's reign. I'd documented every stolen vegetable, every threatening letter, every lie about jurisdiction. Around noon, a van from the local news station pulled up. The reporter, Kelly Young, had been investigating HOA abuses across the county and couldn't believe her luck when I reached out with video evidence. "This is exactly the kind of story we've been looking for," she said, setting up for an interview beside my destroyed sign. "HOAs wield enormous power with little oversight. Your case could shine a light on abuses happening everywhere." We were halfway through the interview when Eleanor's SUV appeared again. She slammed on the brakes when she saw the news van, nearly causing an accident on the quiet road. "You're trespassing," she shouted, storming toward us before noticing the camera. Her demeanor instantly changed. "I mean, we're simply trying to maintain community standards for everyone's benefit." "Ms. Whitfield," Kelly called out, "would you care to explain why security footage shows you destroying private property at 3 a.m.? Eleanor froze. "That's a ridiculous accusation. I was home asleep." "We have the video," I said quietly, "just like we have videos of you stealing produce, cutting my irrigation lines, and trespassing repeatedly. And would you like to explain why you've been claiming jurisdiction over this property when county records clearly show it's outside your HOA boundaries?" Kelly added. Eleanor's face went from red to white. Without another word, she turned and fled back to her vehicle, speeding away so fast she left tire marks. My phone rang 20 minutes after the news crew left. It was Sarah. "The news piece is already getting attention," she said excitedly. "3 other farmers around other HOAs have come forward with similar stories. The county commissioner just called me asking for copies of all our evidence." "So what happens now?" I asked, surveying my damaged crops and destroyed sign. "Now?" Sarah's voice took on a tone I hadn't heard before. Absolute confidence. "Now we have enough. It's time to take them to court. We're filing first thing tomorrow morning, criminal charges against Eleanor and Thomas personally, plus a civil suit against the entire HOA board for harassment, fraud, property damage, and theft." As I hung up the phone, I noticed something unexpected. Several cars pulling up to my farm. But these weren't HOA board members or news crews. They were regular Maple Creek residents, led by Mrs. Rodriguez. "We saw what happened," she said. "We're here to help rebuild your sign and save whatever crops we can. And," she hesitated, "we've called an emergency HOA membership meeting for tonight." Most of us had no idea what Eleanor was doing in our name. As neighbors I'd never met worked alongside me to repair my farm, I realized this fight had become bigger than just me against Eleanor. It had become about standing up to bullies everywhere who abuse power simply because they think nobody will challenge them. Tomorrow would bring the courthouse and the beginning of legal proceedings. But for today, the tide had finally turned. "All rise." The bailiff's voice boomed through the courtroom as Judge Harriet Thompson entered. I wiped my sweaty palms on my pants, stomach in knots. This wasn't just about fines anymore. This was about saving my family's farm legacy. Eleanor Whitfield and the HOA board members sat across the aisle looking smug in their matching business attire. Thomas Jenkins even had the nerve to wink at me. My lawyer, Sophia Rodriguez, squeezed my arm reassuringly and whispered, "Let them look confident. Pride comes before a fall." Judge Thompson peered over her glasses at both sides. "I've reviewed the initial filings. This is quite the neighborhood dispute." She turned to the HOA's attorney. "Counsel, please explain why your clients believe they have authority over property clearly marked as agricultural on county zoning maps." The HOA's expensive lawyer, Mr. Davidson, stood up with a practiced smile. "Your Honor, while technically outside HOA boundaries, the plaintiff's farm creates significant negative impacts on our community's property values. We have expert testimony." "That wasn't my question," Judge Thompson interrupted. "I asked about legal authority, not your feelings about vegetables." Several spectators from the neighborhood snickered. I noticed a local news reporter scribbling notes furiously. Eleanor shifted uncomfortably as her lawyer stumbled through a response about community standards and visual continuity. The judge looked increasingly unimpressed. When it was our turn, Sophia methodically laid out our evidence. The courtroom fell silent as she played video clips showing Eleanor directing HOA members to steal my produce, Thomas cutting my irrigation lines, and both of them destroying my sign while laughing. "Your Honor," Sophia said, pointing to Eleanor. "These aren't concerned neighbors. They're harassers and thieves who've caused thousands in damages while trying to bully my client off land that's been in his family for generations." Judge Thompson's face darkened as she watched Eleanor and Thomas vandalizing my property on the big screen. "Mrs. Whitfield, is that you in this video?" Eleanor glanced at her lawyer, who nodded slightly. "Yes, but the context," Judge Thompson cut in, "appears to be you destroying private property at 3 a.m. Mr. Jenkins, you're clearly visible cutting irrigation lines. Do you deny this?" Thomas stammered. "We were investigating a water leak at 3 a.m. with wire cutters?" While laughing, the judge removed her glasses slowly. "I've presided over many HOA disputes, but this crosses into criminal territory. During a brief recess, I overheard 2 HOA board members arguing with Eleanor in the hallway. "You said this would be easy," one hissed. "You never mentioned breaking anything." When court resumed, my neighbor Mrs. Patel testified about seeing the HOA members taking baskets of my produce. Then Officer Martinez described his visits to my property and confirmed my farm wasn't under HOA jurisdiction. The real bombshell came when Sophia called Angela Winters, the former HOA secretary. Mrs. Whitfield specifically targeted this farm after Mr. Jenkins' development proposal was rejected. Angela testified nervously. She said, and I quote, "If we can't buy him out, we'll force him out." Eleanor's face went pale. Several HOA members gasped. "What development proposal?" Sophia asked innocently. "Thomas Jenkins' construction company wanted to build condos there," Angela explained. Eleanor promised board positions to anyone who helped pressure the owner to sell. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Judge Thompson banged her gavel repeatedly. "Your Honor," Eleanor's lawyer interjected desperately, "this testimony is hearsay and irrelevant to—" "I'll decide what's relevant in my courtroom," Judge Thompson snapped. "And I find it very relevant that your clients appear to have financial motives beyond community aesthetics." As the day wore on, the HOA's case crumbled. Their expert witnesses admitted they never actually measured property value impacts. Their claim about my farm violating county ordinances was disproven by the county inspector himself. By late afternoon, Eleanor looked ready to cry. Thomas kept checking his phone nervously. Judge Thompson finally leaned forward. "I've seen enough. This court will recess until tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., when I'll deliver my ruling." She fixed Eleanor and Thomas with a stern look. "And I strongly suggest all parties be present." As we left the courthouse, reporters surrounded us. "Do you think you'll win?" one asked. I simply smiled and said, "The truth speaks for itself." That night, I could barely sleep wondering what tomorrow would bring. Would the judge see through Eleanor's lies? Would my farm survive this attack? And most worrying, even if we won, would the harassment ever truly stop? Bright and early, I parked my truck outside the courthouse. A small crowd had gathered: neighbors, farmers from nearby properties, even some curious HOA members. The local newspaper photographer snapped pictures as I walked up the steps with Sophia. "Ready for this?" she asked. Before I could answer, I spotted Eleanor huddled with her lawyer near the entrance. She looked like she hadn't slept at all. Our eyes met briefly, and for the first time, I saw something new in her expression: fear. Inside the packed courtroom, Judge Thompson wasted no time. After reviewing all evidence and testimony, this court finds overwhelmingly in favor of the plaintiff. She adjusted her glasses. The Maple Creek HOA has no legal authority over this agriculturally zoned property. Further, the actions taken against the plaintiff constitute harassment, trespassing, vandalism, and theft. Eleanor's shoulders slumped visibly. Thomas stared at the floor. The HOA is ordered to pay $43,500 in damages for destroyed crops, irrigation systems, emotional distress, and legal fees, the judge continued. Additionally, I'm issuing a permanent injunction prohibiting any HOA member from entering the plaintiff's property without written permission. Judge Thompson wasn't finished. More concerning are the criminal aspects of this case. I'm referring this matter to the district attorney for potential charges of criminal mischief, theft, and conspiracy. She looked directly at Eleanor and Thomas. The court sees evidence of potentially fraudulent HOA operations that warrant investigation. As the gavel fell, the room burst into conversation. Several HOA board members immediately distanced themselves from Eleanor, loudly proclaiming they never knew about the midnight vandalism. Outside, the media swarmed us. "How does it feel to win?" a reporter asked, shoving a microphone in my face. "This wasn't about winning," I replied honestly. "It was about protecting a way of life that matters, growing food and preserving farmland." Later that afternoon, I was picking green beans when a car pulled up. To my surprise, Angela Winters stepped out, looking nervous. "I came to apologize," she said, "and to tell you there's an emergency HOA meeting tonight. Eleanor and Thomas were forced to resign. The board wants to make things right." I nodded skeptically. "That's good to hear." "There's more," Angela continued. "Many residents are furious about having to pay the settlement from our reserve funds. They never knew what Eleanor was doing." She hesitated. "Some of us actually moved here because we wanted to be near a working farm. We loved the idea of fresh produce nearby." 2 days later, the new interim HOA president, Mr. Ramirez, knocked on my door with a formal written apology and an unusual proposal. A community garden partnership between my farm and interested Maple Creek residents. "Many folks would love to learn farming skills," he explained. "We could provide volunteer labor and resources. In exchange, maybe residents could share in some produce, properly, with permission this time." I considered this carefully. The work was getting harder as I got older, and extra hands would help. "Let me think about it," I told him. That evening, as I watered my recovering tomato plants, I spotted a familiar figure walking hesitantly up my driveway. Eleanor Whitfield looked different, no designer clothes, no clipboard, no entourage. She stopped at a respectful distance. "I sold my house," she said without preamble. "I'm moving next month." I waited, saying nothing. "Thomas Jenkins promised me a big commission if I helped pressure you to sell," she admitted, staring at the ground. My real estate business was failing. I was desperate. She looked up, meeting my eyes. "It doesn't excuse what I did. I'm sorry." Her apology surprised me, but the damage was done. "I hope you find peace somewhere else," was all I could say. After she left, I sat on my porch watching the sunset over my fields. The district attorney had called earlier. Eleanor and Thomas would face criminal charges, but most board members were cooperating witnesses now. A week later, I posted a new sign at the edge of my property. "Community garden lessons, Saturdays 9 a.m., all welcome." The first Saturday I expected maybe 3 or 4 people. Instead, 25 showed up, including Mr. Ramirez and several families with excited children. "Where do we start?" a teenage boy asked eagerly. I handed him a seedling. "We start by growing something new." By summer's end, my farm had transformed. Neighbors who once complained now brought homemade lemonade to Saturday work parties. Children who'd never seen vegetables growing now proudly showed off their pumpkin patches. The roadside stand became a community gathering spot. One evening, as volunteers helped harvest a bumper crop of corn, Mr. Ramirez approached me. "The HOA voted unanimously on something today," he said, handing me an official-looking document. "We've created a permanent easement in our bylaws recognizing your farm's agricultural status and right to operate. No future board can ever challenge it." I felt a lump in my throat as I read the paper. After all the fights, after all the damage, something beautiful had grown from the conflict. Sometimes the hardest battles lead to the most unexpected victories. My farm hadn't just survived. It had become the heart of a community that finally understood what I had always known. That growing things together builds connections stronger than any HOA rule could ever break. As I surveyed the patchwork of gardens now thriving across my property, I realized I'd gained something I never expected from this fight. Not just neighbors, but friends who valued what this land truly offered. The farm that Eleanor had once called an eyesore was now Maple Creek's most treasured feature. And that was a harvest worth fighting for.